Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's WEConnect International webinar. My name is Maggie Berry, and I'm the Executive Director for WEConnect International here in Europe. And I'm delighted that you've joined us for today's webinar, Effectively Navigate Conflict, Become Brilliant at Dealing with Difficult People. Our presenter today is Chloe O'Sullivan. She is a conflict and mental fitness expert and CEO and founder of Halcyon Global, International certified women-owned business. I'm delighted that Chloe is presenting for us today, and she's going to be sharing her insights into the root causes of a relationship difficulty and conflict. And she's going to talk us through a practical tool that we can use to understand the causes of relationship challenges and strategies that we can use to resolve them. To keep background noise to a minimum, please can I ask everybody to keep themselves on mute. Please do use the chat functionality to ask questions. Your comments in the chat are only going to be visible to me, but I'll be keeping an eye on them and I will relay them to Chloe. Chloe's probably going to talk for about 40 to 45 minutes. And the session is being recorded, so you will be able to listen back again, and we are going to be able to share some slides, and Chloe also has some additional handouts for us as well. So Chloe, thank you so much for presenting for us today. The floor is yours. It's over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maggie. I'm absolutely thrilled to be here. I'm very excited to be sharing some aspects of water peace with you. I'm really passionate about water peace because it actually works. Aside from the impact it's had on my own personal and professional life, I've been lucky enough to witness the impact it's had on several thousands of people's lives all around the world. So I wanted to give you a snapshot of what my life was like before I discovered water peace, because I wasn't always brilliant at dealing with difficult people or dealing with conflict either. My life was actually riddled with conflict. So as a 34-year-old woman, I was terminally single. It was really impossible for anyone to have a long-term personal relationship with me. I had decided as a teenager to cut my dad out of my life, and I haven't spoken to him for years. Maggie, I wonder if yours is on mute. I can hear a lot of background noise. Okay, great, thank you. Yes, I hadn't spoken to my dad for 17 years. I'd fallen out with my brother and my best friend. And to top it all, I had a beloved stepfather who, just 6 months after my mother passed away, he met me for lunch one day and said, "I'll never see you again. You're just too difficult." So my personal life was riddled with conflict, and my business life wasn't much better. I was the deputy director of a bank, and I'd managed to fall out with both of my bosses. And I also had entire departments that were warring against each other. And had you asked me at the time, what was going on, I would have told you, and you would have believed me, that, my family were really difficult, and so were my work colleagues. And so nothing changed. And everything I'd tried so many things with these people, and nothing worked. Until I discovered water peace. And then just 5 years later, everything changed for me. I became blissfully happily married to my wonderful husband. My dad, the man that I hadn't spoken to and I'd hated for most of 17 years, we became great friends, and he walked me down the aisle. My brother was at my wedding. My best friend was my bridesmaid. And my stepdad, the man who was never going to see me again, he sat proudly in the congregation with his new wife, and we shared some tears together that day. And my two former bosses, well, they became great friends and advocates of this work. So the reason I share that with you is, if you're sat there thinking there's this person in your life, in your personal or your professional life, that you'll never have any traction with, that will always be difficult, I want to let you know what's possible with this work. So, oh yes, I put this photograph up of my dad and me on my wedding day because although I mainly share this work in the corporate world, what I've tended to find over more than a decade is the relationships that tend to keep people awake at night, that occupy most of their headspace and stop them from doing a good job at work, are the personal relationships. It's with their spouse, with their teenager, or even a younger child, or with one of their parents or their siblings. So I always invite people to bring those relationships and work on those, regardless of whether we're doing the work at work or whether we're doing it in a public environment. And you'll hear my dad featuring quite a lot today and in the work. So the outcomes from this webinar, you'll start to understand the root cause of all conflicts, whether they're business or personal. One of the things I love about Water Peace is it applies to all relationships. You'll know why nothing that you've tried so far has worked. You'll understand the power of your misconceptions, not just about the other person, but also about yourself. You'll start to understand the power that those have. You'll be able to stop the downward spiral of conflict. You'll know where to focus your efforts to best effect so that it makes a tangible difference. And I put this quote up by Viktor Frankl. This is one of my favourite quotes, that between stimulus and response, space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. It says one thing that people tend to ask me above all else is, well, what can I do in the moment when that person does that thing or they say that thing that drives me crazy? What can I do about that? I just react before I know it. Well, what Water Peace does is it expands that space. So they do that thing, and instead of reacting in that unhelpful, habitual way that we generally regret, we get a bit of space so that you get to choose your response. So what is Water Peace? Well, it's an end-to-end methodology that's learnable and repeatable, and it helps us to uncover our self-deception. And what I mean by that is when we experience somebody as difficult or we get into a conflict with them, we generally get laser focused on all the ways they mistreat us, all the things that they're doing wrong. And we've usually got a lot of allies that agree with us that they're the problem. And what happens is we generally fail to notice that we've gone to this very unhelpful place in our relationship as well. And even if we do notice, we tend to feel utterly justified. So we get stuck, we get into this spiral with them. So how does Water Peace work? Well, through a series of frameworks, language and concepts, it helps us to uncover this place that we visit that's so unhelpful. It shines a light on it so that we have new insight and new choices, so that we're able to respond consciously rather than reacting in the old habitual ways. I do need to let you know that this work isn't for everybody. It isn't for the faint-hearted, because this place that we visit, none of us look good here. It's not a pleasant hangout for any of us, even though we do it and we do it regularly. So I just invite you to try it on for this next hour, just to see how it fits and see if it's something that appeals to you and if there's something in it that resonates for you. And if it's not, I'm sure there'll be something else out there that works for you. So what I'd like to do now is to introduce you to one of the key frameworks in Water Peace that we use. It's called the Model of Influence. You don't need to take any notes as I'm going through this, because I will share a handout with you afterwards. But if you have any questions, please do fire them off to Maggie in the chat, because we will be taking questions straight after the Model of Influence before I go on to the next part of the work. So I'm going to talk you through this model step by step, and it starts off with the inputs and the operating system and the outputs. Now, the most important part of this model is the operating system, because it refers to how we're being. And we can be one of two ways. We can be in the red or at war, or we can be in the green or at peace. Now, in the red, this is a place. Oh, someone's just gone off mute. If you could just mute yourselves, there's a lot of background noise, thank you. So, in the red or at war, this is a place of dis-ease. This is, there's still somebody on mute. Maggie, is it possible to mute everyone from your end?
I am, as they're coming in, I'm muting them. Please don't worry, I'm on it. So just please carry on, and I'll as soon as they make a noise, I'm muting them. Don't worry. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, so in this place of being in the red, this is a place of dis-ease. This is a place where we tend to feel very superior to the other person. They're an idiot, they're stupid, or they're inconsequential to us, they're just an irritant. Or it can be a place where we get very inferior to them and we start to be intimidated or very anxious and nervous about them. It's also a place where we become concerned with blame. We generally blame them, they're wrong, I'm right. But we'll also explore how when we blame ourselves and we go to that place of self-flagellation and feeling unworthy, that can also invite conflict from the other person. It's a place where we tend to get very self-absorbed and in our own brains. Our heads tend to be full of worrying, where we're replaying conversations that we've had with that person. We're wishing we said something different. The next time we see them, we're going to get it right. And it's a place where we feel like we try really hard and nothing works. I'm sure this is sounding familiar to you. Then we have this being in the green or at peace. Now, this isn't the kind of like, yeah, man, hippie peace. It's not that at all. This is where we feel absolute mental clarity. We're at ease. This is a very effortless place for us to be because we're really just being ourselves. So we're viewing the other person as an equal. We're able to listen to them even if we don't agree with them. We're able to problem solve here and be really clear about the action that we need to take. And what's so important about this operating system and how we're being is because when we move over to our outputs over here, what I do, our behavior, almost anything that we do, almost anything in the world that we do can be done from the red or the green. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples of this, a couple of extreme examples. Let's imagine we've got Maggie, our lovely host. Let's imagine that I'm in Maggie's face, I'm screaming and shouting and pointing at her. Do you think I could be in the green with Maggie as I'm screaming and shouting and I'm in her face? As I've described the red and the green to you, it's likely that you'll say, no, that doesn't sound like you're in the green. But if the building's on fire and I'm trying to rescue Maggie and save her life, I could very easily be in the green with her. Similarly, could I roughly grab Maggie and throw her to the ground and be in the green with her? If there's a big bus coming to get Maggie and I'm trying to save her life, again, I could be in the green with her. Now, these are two very extreme examples that hopefully we're not going to come across very often in our lives. So let me give you a more everyday example. Let's imagine we've been on a brilliant listening skills and communication skills workshop. So we've learned these excellent listening and behavioural skills that we're going to use with people. So let's imagine that I'm talking to somebody and I've learnt to incline my head and I've learnt to lean in and maintain eye contact with them. I'm saying to acknowledge that I've heard them. I may even repeat back what they've said to show that I've listened. But inside, I think they're an idiot. So I'm using this brilliant listening skills behaviour over here. But inside, I think they're an idiot. How well listened to do you think they're going to feel? Even with my brilliant listening skills behaviour, it's unlikely that they're going to feel well listened to because there's a disconnect between my behaviour and what's going on inside me. So I'm not saying that what we do, our behaviour, isn't important, but what I am saying that if we only change this, if we only change our behaviour, we're going to have a low influence. Whereas if we change this, what's going on inside, which is where most of the water peace methodology resides, we will have a high influence. And what's important about influence, when we're in a conflict with somebody or we're finding them difficult, generally there's something they're doing or saying that we'd want them to change. So our influence is really important. What leads us to be in the red or the green are our inputs, and these are our emotional state and our perceptions and beliefs. And what I mean by our emotional state are our feelings or the mood that we're in. So let me just give you an example of this briefly. Let's imagine I've had a really rubbish day at work. I'm in a foul temper and I'm at home cooking for the family and I'm bashing the pots and pans around as I'm making dinner, and my husband walks in and he offers to help me. How do you think I perceive him in that moment? What are my beliefs about him in that moment, in my foul mood? I know you've probably experienced this yourself. I'm probably going to see him as interfering, or he doesn't think that I can do it myself, something along those lines. Whereas if I've had an amazing day, I'm in a fantastic mood, full of the joys of spring. I'm cooking the family dinner and my husband walks in and offers to help me, exactly the same thing. I'm probably likely to see him as the very kind and caring man that he actually is. So our inputs, when we change these, this is what leads us to being in the red or in the green. So at this point, I'm sure you're going to have some questions about the model of influence. So I just invite you to share those with Maggie, and she'll pose them to me and I'll do my best to answer them for you.
So I'm just going to back up. If you do have a question for Chloe, please do use the chat function. Like Chloe, nothing's come through just yet. But what I wanted to ask in terms about the what you've just shared with us is that when I think about it from my own perspective, if I'm just angry, if I'm angry, does that mean that I'm only in the red?
That's a great question.
Or yeah, I'm just wondering how, if I think about it for myself, where how it all fits and sits together.
Yeah, great question. So as we can see from the model of influence, our emotional state, anger, lives over here. So let's say my printer malfunctions, which it does sometimes, and I get angry about that. I'm just angry. I'm not at war with anybody. I haven't gone into the red zone. But if I take my anger and I pick up the phone and I call the manufacturer to have a conversation about the printer, and my beliefs and perceptions about that person start to become, I don't know, that they shouldn't happen, they shouldn't help, they should be helping me, that I could very easily take my anger out on that person and start to operate for an operating system of being in the red with them. So anger alone in its own right doesn't mean that I'm in the red, but anger with some perceptions and beliefs about the person that cause me to start treating them in a certain way, that's when I'm operating with them from the place of being in the red. So it's a great question. Thank you.
And we've got a few coming through then. So Diane's asked, how do I change my feelings about someone if I don't like them?
Yeah, what a great question. That's $1 million question. Is it, how do I change my feelings about them? So first of all, we need to recognize what our feelings are. And what will happen is that you will have some perceptions about this person. You will have made up some kind of story about them. So what this work does, it provides us with some frameworks to do this work. So not today in this webinar, but in the methodology, I introduce you to several ways to shift your emotional state. And we also do some work to identify when we have these beliefs and perceptions about somebody, because normally this happens in a nanosecond and we don't realize that we've gone to this place, which is why we talk about it being a place of self-deception. So we will be doing some work on that today, and if we want to go deeper into the work, then I'd have to share the whole methodology with you, which I can't do in an hour, unfortunately.
Oh, that's fine. So I've got a few more questions. Let's see. There's 3 or 4. So Sam's asking, how do we change our mood in the moment? Should we just reschedule for another time? I just walk away, or is there a way to change our mood?
Great. That's a really great question. And it goes back to that Viktor Frankl quote, doesn't it? Because it seems as though when that person does that thing, we react in that unhelpful, habitual way. What War to Peace does is it expands that space so that we have more of a chance to respond. And because what's happening when we're going into the red, we've gone into our survivor brain. So this is we're detecting an immediate danger. And our system starts to shut down so that we're only using the essential parts of our body and our brain in order to combat and survive that enemy. And what this work does is it helps us to build the mental muscles. And what I mean by mental muscles, of course, are the neural pathways that help us to operate from our sage brain, where our wisdom lives. And in building these muscles, these neural pathways, the more that we use them, the more that they're the ones that we go to in these moments. And the old habitual ways stop being our habitual way. So this work is a practice. It's not something that we learn and that's it, we're good to go. It's a practice to build up these muscles, and we'll give you lots of ways of doing that so that you can embed this into your daily work. And so that in those moments, my husband and I do this all the time now, in those moments we get triggered, we can actually catch that trigger in that moment and choose a different way of responding. And that gets really brilliant results and stops it escalating and going into this big spiral that's so familiar to us.
Great.
Thank you.
And I've got a couple of questions about the model. I'm going to do them together because I think they're related. Anna's asking how the model was developed. Does it have elements of psychotherapy and corporate business training combined? And then Rachel's saying there are well accepted theories among psychologists and behavioural therapists that behaviour influences thinking as much or more than the other way around. And she's asking, is that acknowledged in later steps of the model?
Right, okay. So the model itself, well, all of the work is based on neuroscience and positive psychology and cognitive psychology and emotional intelligence. That's the foundations of the work. The model itself, I think it's really important to acknowledge that with any model, it can never adequately allow for the complexities of the human being. You're absolutely right about that. And a lot of people ask me, is there only red and green? And for me, it helps in those moments because we're wanting something, when we get triggered in those moments, we're wanting the simplicity to work out, is it red, is it green? If I'm in the red, I know what to do. If I'm in the green, I'm good to go. So the simplicity of the model is designed to be like this deliberately so that we can access it in the moments when we most need it. And I do invite you to make the model your own. What I'm hoping is, in terms of the behavioural question, as we go through this work, that question will be answered for you. As I introduce you to one of the tools, you'll see where the behaviour comes in and how it's affected by our thinking and our mood.
Okay. Brilliant. There's a couple more questions, but Chloe, shall we move on to the next part of the discussion? Then we can come back to these questions if they haven't been covered.
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to do that.
Okay, as we're already at 25 minutes. 25 minutes past, and as you're quite right, this is a big topic, everybody, and there's only going to be so much that Chloe can cover today, but please do follow up with Chloe afterwards if there's more that you'd like to find out and more that you'd like to ask. These are very high level webinars to give us an introduction to the topic, but Chloe, we will come back. So thank you very much, everybody, for the questions that you have shared. We will come back to them, but Chloe, I'm going to go back onto mute and we can carry on.
Sure. What I would like, I want to echo what Maggie said. I'd be absolutely thrilled for any of you to email me or call me to discuss this further, because obviously we can't do everything that we'd want to do in an hour. So what I'd like you to do now, you were asked to bring a pen and paper to this webinar so that we can actually go through the relationship clarity tool. So as I'm switching to my virtual flip chart, I'd just like you to bring to mind someone you find difficult. And I want you to start thinking about what it is that they're doing or saying that troubles you. So we're just going to move to the virtual flip chart. I'm going to reshare my screen with you. Where are we? There. Is that sharing for you guys? Can you now see the spiral of disempowerment?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. So what I'd like you to do is just divide your page into 4 with a horizontal and a vertical line. And we're going to look at, in our first quadrant, what it is that he or she does. And the example I'm going to use in this case is with my dad, something that my dad did. Because I'm sure you can imagine, after 17 years of being in relationship, out of relationship with my dad, when we first got back together, it wasn't smooth sailing. You know, my dad was the same guy and I could still get triggered by him. So the thing that he did that really bothered me was he didn't telephone me. And he did used to telephone my brother every Sunday without fail. So I went into the red with my dad about this. So before I tell you what happens next, I just invite you to consider, what is it that your person's doing? And importantly, I really want you to think about what's the factual thing they're doing. So you might be minded to put, they don't listen, they ignore me, they bully me, they shut me down. And those are all perceptions of what it is that they're doing. So I really invite you to consider, if it was being filmed and you were presenting it to a judge, what's the actual thing that they're saying or doing that's bothering you? And I'm just going to give you a minute to do that. So if anyone's watching this on catch up and they're not running through the model, feel free to move on by 60 seconds and we'll catch up after that. Okay. So I'm hoping that you've got a factual thing in your box 1 now. Then we're going to move to box 2. So when he doesn't telephone me and I'm in the red, what are the ways that you think I perceive him? Well, I'll share with you my perceptions of him were, he doesn't care, he doesn't love me, he's too busy for me, he's selfish, he's unfair, he can't be bothered, and in summary, he's a bad dad. So I invite you now to write down all the labels, all the thoughts that you have about this person. Everything that you've wanted to say about them, and maybe it's been on the edge of your lips, maybe you've even shared it with them. I just invite you to write it down. And I'm just going to give you another minute. I'm going to time this time so that people are clear that it is a minute, that they need to fast forward if they're not doing the exercise themselves. And of course, this is private work. You never need to share it with anybody. So I really invite you to write everything you've ever thought about them, all the labels, anything that you have to say. Got about another 20 seconds. Okay, so once you've got your list there, we're going to move on to box 3. So when I'm perceiving my dad as someone that doesn't care, doesn't love me, he's too busy for me, he's selfish, unfair, can't be bothered, he's a bad dad, what do I become? What do I do? How do I become? So I'm sure you can imagine, you may have something similar for yourself. I become upset, I become hostile, I become sarcastic. If I do pick up the phone to him and he answers, oh, the phone works, Dad, you have got a phone that works. I don't phone him. I complain about him. I seek allies. I ask my friends, does your dad call you? Yeah, that's what dads do, isn't it? They call their kids. He calls my brother. He's always loved him more than me. That story that we have. And I find evidence that I'm right. So this box requires a lot of honesty. So I invite you to be really honest with yourself. And we're looking for you to write down at least 5 things of the ways that you become and all the things that you do. And I'm going to give you a minute to do this. So it may be that you explode, or it may be that you hide how you feel, that you pretend that you're okay. So smile and nod. No problem here. Everything's absolutely fine. Not a problem. Perhaps one minute you explode, the next minute you avoid or you sulk. What's true for you? What's going on inside that you're not sharing with them? What's going on outside? Are you complaining about them to someone else? Are you getting people on your side? A lot of us do that. That's very common. You're finding evidence of what they did. They did it last week. They did it the week before. They've just done it again. They always do it. Perhaps you exaggerate. It's another thing that's very common that we do when we're in this red zone, in the war zone. Okay, so once you've got this list, we're going to move to box 4. He or she perceives. Now, it's notoriously difficult when we're in this war zone to imagine how someone else perceives us, you know, putting ourselves in their shoes. So what I would generally get you to do to get the best chance of getting insight here is to cover up what you've written in boxes 1 and 2 and not share that with anybody, because that's our version of events and our story. And even in sharing it with somebody, we're almost getting them on board to our story of what the person's like. So instead, what I would typically get you to do is to show someone this list without any context at all, just show them what's been written there and ask the question, how would you perceive someone, not you, how would you perceive someone who was being or behaving like this towards, in my case, their dad? For you, it might be your boss, your child, and just write down what it is that they're saying. I'm guessing for most of you, you don't have someone in the room with you at the moment. So if you're on your own, I just invite you to imagine that a good friend of yours has come to you with this dilemma and they've shown you this list and they've asked you the question, how would you perceive someone that's behaving like this, someone that's being like this? What labels would you give them? And just write down the list of what they tell you. In my case, when I did this, I was told difficult, high maintenance, uncaring daughter, doesn't love him, pain in the, you get the picture. So I just invite you to spend another minute just working your way through that. And if you do lots of different things, if you're very inconsistent, then I invite you to write, you know, he perceives someone inconsistent. She perceives someone that they don't understand what's going on. That often happens, that people really just don't know what's going on for us when we show up in multiple different ways. And if you're consistently one way, then it might be much more clear to you how someone would perceive that kind of behaviour or that way of being. We've just got a few more seconds. Okay, so now we've completed our 4 quadrants, and I want to ask you, if you had asked me at the time, what do I want more than anything else in the world at that time, what would my genuine answer have been? I would have told you, you know, I want my dad to phone me. But if we look at what's been written in box 4, we can see that it's unlikely to invite the thing that I want. In fact, it's more likely to invite the thing that I really don't want, the thing that's bothering me about them. So the reason this is called the spiral of disempowerment is, you know, they do that thing, we perceive them in a certain way, we make up this story about who they are and what's going on. And from those perceptions, we become a certain way, we do certain things, and they perceive. So we go around in this spiral. So I'm just going to carry on a little bit further with this work, and then I'm going to invite some more questions from you. So if we go back to what we've written in box 1, can we ever control what someone else does? Even if we really want to. Of course, we can't ever actually control this. Can we control our perceptions? It seems hard in the moment, you know, when they do that thing, you know, my child leaves their clothes on the floor, particularly if they've just been ironed, they just drop them on the floor, and in a nanosecond they're lazy, you know, they're ungrateful, they're disrespectful. It happens in a nanosecond. But can I control that? Well, with some work and some time and effort, I can control this. Can I control what I become and what I do? Again, it doesn't seem like it in the moment, but of course, With work, we can extend that pause, extend that space. So I can control this. Can I ever control what someone perceives about me? Much as I'd like to, I can't control ever what someone perceives. I can influence it, but I can't control it. It may not surprise you to know that when we're in this red zone, we spend most of our time and effort focusing our attention and our thinking time on the two parts that we can't control. And what Water Peace does, it invites us to spend our time over here on the parts that we can control. And so if you take nothing else away from this webinar, I'm going to introduce you to an expression that I'm sure you'll have heard before, that's used widely in athletics and sports and in business: control the controllables. So all of our work is around how we can control this to get the outcomes that we want. So again, at this stage, I'd like to invite you to ask any questions that you have about anything that we've done so far. So if you'd like to fire those off to Maggie, I'd be delighted to hear them.
Thank you, Chloe. And while you're doing that,
please do share your questions and how you find that piece of work around the spiral in terms of thinking out, thinking out and kind of breaking down your own behaviour as well, which can always be an interesting. Do you have any business examples of this? Obviously, the example you've shared about your dad is a personal one. Can you share any context, maybe in a workplace or a business context?
Yes, I absolutely can. So I think I've got one here. Yes, I do. So one of the ones that I hear really, really often is that somebody publicly disagrees with me. You know, we're in a meeting and I've pulled together this proposal and someone just slams it down and is all over it. So let's use the spiral for that. So somebody publicly disagrees with my proposal. You know, I go to the red, and how am I perceiving? Maybe they're difficult, or they're mean, or maybe that they're bullying me. I might feel that they've humiliated me, or that they don't understand, or that they don't value my contribution, or even that they're against me. I may see them as being competitive, or he thinks he's better than I am. You know, so these are the types of perceptions that we generally have. I'm sure you'll have your own. It's very personal work, this, but I wanted to give you this example. So when I'm perceiving them in that way, how do I become? What do? I get upset, I get hostile. If it's in a work context, I'm probably going to pretend I'm okay when I'm not. I may become argumentative because I might not be able to control it, but I'm more likely to just get shut down. I might point out why he's wrong. I'm probably going to stop listening to him, and I'm probably going to find out who's on my side in that meeting. And we can do this very subtly, you know, by making eye contact and maybe giving the eye roll to somebody's, oh yeah, we're on side. And if you're not getting that response from somebody, they're not on my side. So some of this is very, very subtle. It's likely that I'm going to find out evidence that I'm right about him, that this is what he does. He's competitive and he's against me, or she's against me, whoever it is. How does that person perceive all of this behavior and all the ways that I'm being? Well, maybe that I don't believe in myself, or I don't believe in my work because I'm not able to adequately articulate all of the great things about my proposal, because I've gone into that survivor mode, I've gone into that reactionary mode, so I'm not being responsive to it. I've been triggered into the red. Maybe they think I have to up my game. Maybe they see me as someone difficult, hostile, inconsistent. Maybe they see me as unassertive, or maybe they see me as being intimidated, or opposite, that they think that I'm, I think I'm better than they are. What's this going to invite from them? It's probably going to invite more of the same. So let's just imagine, because you remember I said when I was in the bank, there were sometimes entire departments warring against each other. Let's imagine that I'm head of a function, let's say finance, for example. Let's say I'm in finance and there's the head of procurement, and we are at loggerheads. We just don't get on. We don't see eye to eye. We don't agree about how to do business. If my team wants to be successful in my eyes, how do they need to view procurement? You know, if they're going to see procurement as, oh, they're dead easy to get on with, they've got these really great ideas, they're probably not going to be my kind of people. So my people, they're going to be a bit on my side, and their people are probably going to be on their side. And if the conflict really is prolonged and escalates, we may even take it outside of those departments. How do you experience procurement? Yeah, they're not very helpful, are they? So that we infect other people with this. And I'm sure you've experienced this in your friendship networks and in your family circles as well. There's often that one person in the family, right? You know, that one person that we don't want to have a meeting with. It's like, oh, you're meeting Jeff today. Good luck with that. We all know what Jeff's like. Yeah, so there's this contagion effect that happens both at work and in our personal lives. Does that help, Maggie?
Yes, absolutely. I think
for, you know, a lot of the context that we're looking at is in a workplace scenario, either with colleagues or employees or that that kind of thing. So I've got a couple of questions that have come through. Somebody's asked about, and I think the answer is that you can't, because the previous one said that you can't control everything, only control what you can control. And she's just asking, when it comes to gender related stereotypes, for instance, in a hostile political environment, how do you control the uncontrollable of the macro environment? And the example she's given, the Australian female Prime Minister's outburst, examples of positive expressions of anger or disagreement when it's necessary to stand up for yourself, or sometimes just you have to walk away. It's a kind of a series of comments.
Okay, so I think what I'm going to do for this one is go back to the model of influence, because I think it's really important that we recognise, when I talked earlier about what I do, our behaviour, almost anything can be done from the red or the green. I think it's helpful to give some more examples of that. So let's say, so I'm in the red over here, I can fire someone, I can sue someone, I can kill someone, and I can exit a relationship. From the green, I can fire someone, I can sue someone, I can even kill someone, and I can exit a relationship from the green. My experience and their experience of it is going to be entirely different depending on which one that I'm in. So one of the reasons I've moved away from the terms at war and at peace and talked about in the red and in the green is because, you know, I don't ever want you to make up that the tough stuff happens in the red zone and the soft stuff happens in the green zone. We can be very tough. In fact, we are more likely to honour our boundaries when we're in the green than when we're in the red. The red place may feel like it's a place of strength, but actually we're very vulnerable in that space. So, yeah, I think it's really important to make that point. And I think the other underlying question that you have there in what you're asking me is, you know, why should I do the work when they're clearly the problem? And I get asked this a lot. And my question to you is, who's suffering? Who is suffering when we're in the red? Well, I'm suffering for sure. You know, I've got all of this headspace taken up by this person. It's as though I'm letting them live for free in my brain. I stop being responsive and I get reactive, so I feel completely out of control. Whereas when I'm in the green, I'm not triggered. I'm a very reasonable human being that can respond to what's being said, and I have absolute mental clarity. In fact, from a neuroscientific point of view, I have much more access to the parts of my brain where wisdom resides. So that's why I'd want to be there and control that part rather than trying to control what's going on over there in a system. That's where I want to have the influence, right? If I don't like the system of what's going on, I want to have influence over it. So that's why I want to do the work of being in the green. Yeah, thanks, Maggie.
Super, thanks, Chloe. And then I've got another question from Thuria who's saying, brilliant framework. Thank you very much, Chloe. How can we change what we perceive? If reality keeps reminding us that our story is right. In other words, can we change our perception without support from the other person?
Great. Yeah, it's a similar sort of question, isn't it? Is it really, does just one person have to do the work? Surely they have to do the work as well. Well, the great news is that they don't ever have to do the work. I think one way of describing it is when we're in the red zone, it's as though we've got these sort of barbs sticking out of us, and when people come at us, they latch on. Whereas when we're in the green, we're smooth. There's nothing for them to latch onto. So it's has another way of describing this. I'm sure you've experienced this yourself. Have you ever really lost it with somebody? You've absolutely lost it and you're so furious, and they are incredibly reasonable. They're reasonable and they're kind and they're measured. It's really hard to keep going at them, because they're being so reasonable. So it sort of extinguishes the fire. It extinguishes the flame. And from a neuroscientific point of view, this is because our mirror neurons are in operation. So what happens is that we are wired so that our psychological and emotional state is picked up by others automatically. So they start to experience the same emotions and physiological responses as we're having. So there's like this contagion effect. So if we are in the red, we are going to be inviting this from others. When we're in the green, we're going to be inviting that from them as well. Mm-hmm. So I really invite you to do this work, not to get that outcome, but to stop the suffering, and so that you can be, just naturally, effortlessly yourself without the stress, but also knowing, and in my experience, 100% of the time, when I'm in the green, I invite someone else to be there. I've never had an experience where I've truly been in the green that hasn't invited somebody there and hasn't got me the outcome that I've wanted.
Fantastic, thank you. So I've got another, and Johanna's asked a question, and I don't know whether if this is a big question or not. She's like, what do you, on your slide here, it says emotional state plus beliefs and perceptions. And she's just saying, what are you meaning exactly by perceptions?
So in the example I gave in the spiral, my dad, bad dad, I've got, it's a label that I've got. He's a bad dad, and I've got lots of evidence for why he's a bad dad. That would be my perception. And my belief at the time was, dads should call their kids, or there'll be lots of beliefs that we have. So first of all, this work is never about getting you to change your beliefs. They're yours. It's up to you whether you find that belief's serving you, and that's what this work is doing. Does this belief serve me? So for example, all of our beliefs are based on shoulds. So there's probably one that you've all heard: parents should love their children equally. Yeah, most of us have heard that rule. Who made up that rule? It might be that it's a great rule for us to follow if we can, but what if you actually don't love your kids equally? What do we do then? Do we make ourselves wrong our whole lives? Do we go into the red with ourselves and beat ourselves to a small pulp? So there's this belief that's been made up by somebody that we should do this thing, we should love our children equally. And for me, as soon as I realised this was just something made up that we'd been taught, it suddenly no longer became of interest to me. So you remember me saying, I thought, my dad loved my brother more than me. It's suddenly not of any relevance to me anymore. So in challenging that belief, it helped to ease something for me. Now, that's not to say I'm going to abandon that belief. When I have my own kids, I might really want to hold on to that dearly and do absolutely everything in my power to love those children equally and treat them equally. But does it make sense for me to insist upon somebody else sharing the same belief as me? And if it is really important to me, then I want to have influence over them, right? And where's my best place of influence? Is it by making them wrong? Ever been on the receiving end of someone who thinks you're wrong about something and that you're bad or you're mistaken? How influential are they to you? So this is what the work is concerned about, this part. So we're not saying abandon your beliefs, and we are saying, work out what the belief is that's underpinning it and challenge its validity, and see whether it's something that you still want to hold on to tightly. I hope that answers the question. As I said, please tell me if it doesn't answer your questions.
It does, and
to help with this.
So there's a follow-on, and actually it links to a question that somebody else has kind of slightly asked as well. So I'm going to go to first. Alison's just saying, describing the barbs of the red versus the smooth of the green. Says, do you happen to know if people are less likely to be bullied if they are green?
Yeah, that's a great question, isn't it? Because this work is certainly not blaming people for stuff that happens to them. Because we have to accept that people are going to do stuff. And sometimes we are genuine victims of stuff that happens to us. So I would never want to say, I'm not saying, that it's our responsibility if someone bullies us. What I'm saying is if we are bullied and we go into the red with it, we're less likely to get the result that we want than if we go into the green with it. So we're not saying that bullying's okay. We're saying, am I going to get triggered into this place that's spectacularly unhelpful, that makes me even more vulnerable to reacting or being intimidated by somebody, or thinking that I'm not worthy and I deserve it? Or are we going to be in the green where, it's really crystal clear to us, this is not okay with me. I've got a boundary around this, and I'm going to take really clear, focused action from this place. Remember, being in the green doesn't mean that we're not taking really crystal clear action.
Great, thank you. And I still want to come back to a couple of questions that were asked halfway through. I've got one more. I'm just going to ask this one more question about the green at the moment. So again, about how do we know when we're in the green, or how can we be in the green more?
Okay, yeah, two good. So I think one of the best ways to describe you being in the green is imagining that you're with somebody who you find easygoing. So you're just hanging out with somebody that you find easygoing. What I'm imagining is true for you. This seems to be the case for all of us. Whenever I explore this with people in our work, it's just effortless. We're not thinking about what we're saying, we're not policing ourselves. We can still challenge each other, we can still disagree, but there's none of that internal dialogue or whirring going on, any of that spin. Oh, sorry, I just heard some. Was that a second question that just came in?
No, sorry, carry on.
Okay, yeah, so that it's a feeling of ease. We're just being ourselves. So we often don't notice we're in the green because we're not being given any signs of it. Whereas in the red, although this is a place of self-deception, one of the big parts of the water piece methodology is getting very familiar with what this red zone looks like. Because there are things that we share in common when we're in the red zone. And then there's some really personal things. There's some really personal red flags that show up to us to highlight to us we've moved into this zone. And there's also some very particular ways that we may show up in a work environment that are so different to how we show up when we're triggered in our family environments that we don't realise that we've moved to the red. I think one thing I'd like to add to that, Maggie, is it sometimes helps people to recognise that we have green and then we have red. There's no brownish tinge in the middle because that just makes things far too complex for it to be helpful for us. But the red zone, hello, Mum? If we just step into that red zone, we may have just had a small niggle.
Hello.
Somebody not on mute at the moment. If you wouldn't mind muting yourself.
Everybody's on mute. I'm confused because everybody's on mute. But if you're, Chloe, please carry on. And I've got one more question. We've only got 4 minutes, so maybe we can, we can go to this other question.
So I'll just finish off with this then, Maggie. So we've got the green and we've got the red, and the red zone.
Hello, Mom.
You can just step into it, and there's a slight niggle. We can move further into it, where we're really starting to get very angry, frustrated,
hello,
or hurt or upset or wounded by somebody, and then all the way at the extreme, we want to stab someone to death. We're absolutely gone. We're completely in reactionary mode. So we can step into that red very, very easily. And with this work, the great news is,
hello, Mom.
recognise that we're there, we can.
Hello.
Johanna, can I ask you just to hang fire? We've got your question in the mute, and I've got somebody ahead of you in the question queue, but I will try and squeeze it in. Chloe, please carry on.
That's it. Yeah, I just said the part about the red and the green and the different.
There we go. Okay, I'm going to go to the final. I'm going to go to this other question. There's actually one from Christina earlier.
Yeah.
Which is actually it's kind of looking at it from a different perspective. And she's, how did you manage conflict?
Hello.
Feel angry or upset with a colleague, yet they perceive you to be a threat and constantly triggered by actions which appear neutral.
Hello, Mom.
Johanna, can I ask you just to hang fire? We're just answering another question just now, please. So it's about when you're not feeling it, but you are perceived as being something else and a threat, and the actions, you know, which to you are neutral. And so it's kind of looking at it from the other side. And
right. Yeah, so one of the really important parts about this work is we can't ever diagnose if someone else is in the red or the green, and it's really unhelpful for us to consider that. So all of the work is concerned with, you know, what is going on for me here. So you're right, you might be in the green and someone is perceiving you in that way. So it might be that you invite them to have that discussion with you, and if you're in the green, then you're going to be able to have that responsive conversation with them. If you're triggered into the red, then it's likely that you're going to get defensive and take it personally and start justifying why it is that you're behaving the way that you're being. But what I find for me is if I'm truly in the green with somebody, their perceptions of me aren't ever a problem. They just aren't. They're just not of any consequence to me because I'm just being myself, and that's okay. And I'm operating in accordance with my values and my integrity. So I would, you know, I'd invite you to have that conversation. If you really truly believe that you're in the green with them, then, you know, you might find out from them what it is that's troubling them. You might even want to share the spiral of disempowerment with them. If ever you do that, by the way, I'd always invite you to do yours first so that you can show them that this happens to you too. You go to the red zone and make an invitation for them, because there's nothing worse than somebody telling us that we're wrong. We've all been on the receiving end of that, and it doesn't really invite or inspire us to change. It just invites us to get defensive and move into the red.
Yeah. So I'm conscious that we're at the hour. There are more questions, but I'm gonna close the session here. What I am gonna say is please do follow up with Chloe if you've got more questions, and if you'd like to find out more about any of this, the model or the strategies, or even just to have a further discussion with Chloe. She is an expert in this area around conflict, you know, both at home and in your personal life, but I think from a WEConnect perspective, more importantly in the office.
Thank you, Mom.
And that kind of piece. So please do follow up directly with Chloe. We are going to share the recording and the slides. And Chloe, I know that you've got a couple of handouts that Jay's going to share with everybody. Afterwards. I've got a few people saying thank you so much. Really helpful, like the model, really interesting session, well presented and well illustrated. And also, Lindsay, just really helped me to refresh my experience of the model and be reminded of the power behind it. So, Chloe, thank you so much for sharing this. Conflict can have such a negative impact on everybody's lives, but it is possible to deal with it and approach it in as positive a way as possible to get a healthy outcome for all parties involved. So thank you so much for sharing, and everybody, please do follow up with Chloe directly. Her contact details are there, but we're certainly happy to facilitate any introductions as well. But yes, Chloe, thank you very much. And yeah, everybody's just saying thank you. Great session, lots of good advice. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Maggie and Joe. Really appreciate the opportunity and really look forward to hearing from you. Bye. Brilliant. For now.
Thanks everyone. Bye. Bye.
Well done. Bye.